let's talk about the cerebrum, which is flashing at you in green on the screen. It will be divided into two hemispheres. The brain as a whole will have a number of surface markings. Ridges are known as gyrus is singular, gyri is plural. There will be shallow grooves. Sulcus is singular, sulci is plural. And then there will be deeper grooves, which are known as fissures. The longitudinal fissure will divide the two hemispheres. The transverse cerebral fissure is going to divide the cerebrum from the cerebellum. Cerebellum means little brain. So let's take a look at this image. We're going to be talking about these lobes. The frontal lobe is the one that is in pink. The parietal lobe is just posterior to that, sort of in a middle blue color. The occipital lobe is the posterior and inferior aspect of the cerebrum. That's in the lightest blue. The temporal lobe is in the darkest blue. Inferior to the cerebrum is the cerebellum, and you can see the transverse cerebral fissure marked. If you look at the frontal lobe and then look at the parietal lobe, in between those lobes will be the central sulcus. Anterior to that is the precentral gyrus, that is also known as the motor cortex, which may be called the primary motor cortex, or the somatomotor cortex. Posterior to that is the, what a surprise, postcentral gyrus. That is the sensory cortex. You may hear it called primary sensory cortex, or, what a surprise, somatosensory cortex. That little blowout that you can see at the bottom part of the image shows you a fissure, which is going to be a deep groove. It shows you a sulcus, which is a less deep groove, and you can also see a gyrus, which is going to be one of those hills or bumps or ridges. I also want you to take note of the fact that you can see the cortex labeled on that little image, that little blow up of the cerebrum. The cortex is composed of gray matter. Gray matter is basically unmyelinated axons. White matter is unmyelinated axons, and hence the terms gray matter and white matter. This shows you a gyrus and two sulci. This shows you the two hemispheres, and you can see the longitudinal fissure nicely marked there. You can also start to determine which of the lobes. You can see the frontal lobe is going to be the anterior aspect of the cerebrum, and you can see the occipital lobe as well as the parietal lobe. This right in through here then, if this is the frontal lobe and this is the parietal lobe, this right here has to be that central sulcus, which means that this is the precentral gyrus, which is the motor cortex, and this is the postcentral gyrus, which is the sensory cortex. Shows you another image of the right and left hemispheres, and you can actually see the central sulcus labeled right here. So this guy is going to be the precentral gyrus, and this guy is going to be the postcentral gyrus. Precentral gyrus is, you got it, the motor cortex, and the postcentral gyrus is, of course, the sensory cortex. Longitudinal fissure is right there. So what are the important sulci that you need to know? The central sulcus, we've already talked about that. We've already mentioned how it is going to divide the frontal and parietal lobes. And we've already talked about the pre and postcentral gyri. the parieto-occipital sulcus. What is that? What a surprise. It tells you exactly what it's going to separate, both the occipital and the parietal lobes, and the lateral sulcus, which is going to divide the temporal lobes from the parietal lobe. Within the cerebrum, you're going to have various fibers. Myelinated fibers are those that have that lipoprotein around the axons, and they will be association fibers or projection fibers or commissural fibers. Association fibers are going to interconnect neurons within the same hemisphere. Projection fibers are going to be fibers that either ascend or descend. If you have ascending fibers, they are carrying sensory information. If you have descending fibers, they are carrying motor information. How do I know? Because sensory information is always coming up, in and up, and motor information is always going down and out. Commissural fibers are interconnections between the two hemispheres, and classically you are talking about the corpus callosum, which is a bridge of white matter in between the two hemispheres. Let me repeat that in case you were asked what the function of the corpus callosum is or what the corpus callosum is. It is a bridge of white matter between the two hemispheres. And this shows you some of each. Association fibers, you'll remember, are going to be in the same hemisphere, right? Commissural fibers will interconnect the hemispheres, so this is the corpus callosum. And the projection fibers are going to either be ascending or descending. And if you hear ascending or descending, they will have to send fibers either up or down the spinal cord. And that shows you the corpus callosum. This is actually just the right hemisphere, and you can see the corpus callosum outlined in orange right here. Why do we care about the myelinated fibers? Because they are going to speed the transmission of action potentials. Very important. There is hemispheric dominance. So most of the basic life functions are controlled equally by both hemispheres. The left hemisphere in general has greater control over language-related activities. When you talk about right brain versus left brain, the left brain person is supposed to be more logical and understand sequences and mathematics better. And a right brain person is supposed to be more creative and see the whole picture and patterns and images and be able to understand color and music and just be far more creative. And I like this image because it shows you what the left and right hemisphere are supposed to be responsible for. Of course, there's a lot of crossover and it's going to vary from person to person. Now, this shows you, I like this, the next couple of slides are kind of fun because this shows you what's going on with the way that your brain is organized. So take a minute or two and check that out, and hopefully that will help. Remember what's controlled by either side of the brain. And this is also fun. So take a look at the chart and say the color, not the word. And it takes a lot of effort to say the color and not the word, because the right brain is trying to tell you to say color, and the left brain is telling you to read what the color is supposed to be. What fun.